on everything except space. All right, good evening, folks. If you happen to have joined, if you're watching this later, you may have watched my video on YouTube saying that I was going to be going live a few hours earlier than this, but unfortunately, work did not allow that, and things got pushed off until later in the evening. So, thanks for still finding this. So, I am currently simultaneously transmitting this on both YouTube and Telegram, which seems to be working, which is nice. Which is nice. Now, I've been encouraging people to find me on Telegram, and in my last video on YouTube, I explained why. Basically, I mean, just the long story short, is YouTube censors my content. It blocks it. It slows it down. Um, it might just be using the algorithm. Whatever, doesn't matter. The problem is, X would do the same thing. You're subject to the algorithm, and the algorithm can make you pay. So I've started on Telegram, and I encourage people to join me on Telegram. I'm transmitting this simultaneously on Telegram and YouTube. This way, if people want to hear what I have to say, we don't have to be concerned about whether or not YouTube is going to behave. Or even X. Even with Elon Musk in charge of X, I still have noticed that when I post something on X, in fact, I'll go look at it right now. We can look at it together here. So I posted this. I have 500 followers on X. I have only 13 views. So that's pretty small number, pretty terrible. So if you want to become more involved in the conversations that I have with just in general, you need to find me on Telegram. The link is in the description. Actually, you know what? You might have to look at a previous one. I don't know if I actually added it to the description yet. You know what? I want to post it into the. I got a viewer already on YouTube making fun of me. Okay, so let me post the link to the YouTube. Excuse me, post to the Telegram channel in the chat, and then later on I'll have to add it to the description. It's my fault for not adding it originally. After this, what we might call administrative stuff is done, I'll get right to the heart of things here. But in the chat is the link to the YouTube channel. The Telegram channel. Give me Jimmy Crickets, I tell you. Okay, let's try this again. All right. So what I'm going to talk about tonight, I feel like I need to give a preliminary kind of introduction. If you've watched my YouTube videos or followed me on X, you have a pretty good idea of where I'm coming from. But let me paint the picture this way. If we go back in time and we think about the founding of the United States, they created a constitution, which the whole point of the Constitution was to maximize individual liberty, but not necessarily at the expense of. Well, they didn't want to create anarchy. Their idea was to allow people to govern themselves, and to do this within a framework that would have significant checks and balances. Because if you go back in time, and it's hard to think about this, to think about what the world was like almost 300 years ago now, in 1770s or whatever, their frame of reference would have been uh, what was going on in the European powers, all the different wars, like continual wars between the European nations. And long story short, they did not want that to happen in the United States, in the new country that they were forming. So they wanted self government, but they wanted checks and balances on ambitious people, so on and so forth. But at the same time that this was going on, there was an alternative way of looking at the world, which was represented by Thomas Hobbes in his book Leviathan. And the Leviathan, if you're not familiar with that concept, the Leviathan was a mysterious giant sea creature that's found just described in the book of Job in the Bible. But Hobbes talked about Leviathan as being basically the state. It's the Leviathan was the sole repository of the coercive powers of the state. So the way that Hobbes perceived it was that in order to have a peaceful society, what you would do is you would give all the rights and the authorities and the power to do violence to the state. What could go wrong, right? And the state then, as the sole arbiter and repository of the powers of the state, the police powers, we'll call them, would then ensure that everyone would have peace. And the founders basically rejected this because they had seen what the state had done in Europe and realized that if the police powers was given to the state, that could be a recipe for as much violence and bloodshed as anarchy. And they were, of course, not wrong on that. We've seen that historically. They've been vindicated on this. I mean, look at, of course, what Germany did during World War II. But there's others too, even here in America. Just look what they did to the various Indian tribes. As soon as you give the exclusive right to use violence to the state, and you deprive the populace from the ability to defend themselves, if necessary through violence, the state will just run roughshod over all of that. And there's some famous examples. So there's various trails of tears. The more famous one being the one that happened to the Cherokees, where they first deprived them of their weapons, and then for their own good, of course, and then they came through and they forced the Cherokees off of their native lands into the area of Oklahoma, which is, no offense to any people from Oklahoma, whoever might watch this, just not as beautiful. And that happened in this country, even though the framers had put in these checks and balances to supposedly preclude such a thing from ever happening. So the point in all this is that what the people who believe in the, we'll call it the Leviathan model, did not hold sway in the United States, but basically it represented a bargain, as it were. The idea was, as I already said, you give the state the police powers. That means the right to use violence as necessary, according to the rule of law. And as a consequence, and as a result of this, the benefit is you have civilization that has peace. The founders rejected this, but there's been this slow trend, a trajectory, inevitable, continually accumulating, um, where the state, the government, has nonetheless, I'm talking about the United States here, the U.S. government has accumulated these police powers to such an extent that, all right, well, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. The point is that by about 1910, 1920, give or take, with the rise of the progressive era in the United States, you had proponents basically of the Leviathan model take control of the various state governments, take control of the U.S. government. People like Woodrow Wilson, and people forget that even Theodore Roosevelt was a progressive, and all these people saw very little reason for why the individual citizen should have the right to bear arms or any of that stuff. Not to make this into a Second Amendment kind of conversation. That's not the goal here. But just the goal is to show that right around 1920, 1910, right about in there, there became a, how do I put it? The trajectory within the population so that there became a critical mass of people who believed that the best way for, I don't want to say utopia, um, even though many of them would have used that phrase, was to put into the hands of the government the power to help anyone as they would have need. Now, the basic problem with that formula is any power that you give to the government to help you is a power then that they have to hurt you. And whether or not they help or hurt you depends on whether or not the right people are in the government. And that was the problem. That was the problem that the founders aimed to resolve. They they observed that um, that the government is basically it's still composed of people, right? And so it's almost inevitable that whoever's in the government then is going to more likely help the people that they favor and hurt the people that they don't. Neither I'm not going to really get into that. I mean, even that was compromised. That was compromised very early on. Um, Tragically, I would say, but nonetheless, that was the case. And so, beginning around 1920, 1930 or so, the population of the United States um, became more and more of the sort that trusted their government to provide for them in all of their needs and to protect them from any kind of problem that might occur, whether it be financial, of course, militarily. And right about then, if you remember, in the 1930s, you had the Great Depression, and FDR was was very enthusiastic in his efforts to help people out of that. Many people would say that the government helped create the problems of the Great Depression, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that as people's financial well-being suffered, they looked to the government to bail them out of that, and that's how we famously have got Social Security, right? Came out of that. That be like today, of all the things that people remember coming out of FDR's time, is Social Security, right? Um, but actually, FDR erected this giant federal apparatus, which has only grown bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger over the years. And so, where I'm going with this long preface, is that now here we are. See if that was if FDR was 1930s. Well, we're almost 100 years later, right? Wow, it's hard to amazing to think about that. It's 90 years at least, right? 1920. What year is it? 2024. Whew, we're right in there. Coming on the verge of a solid century after this bargain. So according to the bargain, which everyone has become comfortable with and situated with over the last 90 years, is that The federal government, in particular, but certain state governments also, but the federal government for sure, is going to provide for all of our essential needs, our basic security, and yes, we'll have to pay taxes. We'll have to follow a lot of laws. We'll be subject to a lot of regulation. But in return, the federal government will make sure that we do not drown. That's why I have this meme up here. Let's see if we can zoom in here so you can see it. So what's what's interesting about it? So North Carolina. This is why I'm on Telegram now. This is why I want you to find me on Telegram. Join me on Telegram. Because the last time that I called attention to a crisis that occurred in our country, YouTube basically shut down the algorithm and denied me views. And that I think it must be safe to say, because they have recently allowed more views about what happened in East Palestine, where you had the trains derail and all that toxic nonsense. And I posted a video about that. And YouTube, it's not like they didn't like it, but they shut down. All right, okay. I almost triggered myself. I'm so upset about it. Actually, even now. But then you had what happened in Hawaii with the fire that happened there, that which destroyed a whole community, and everyone was like, "Where's the U.S. government?" But apparently, so right now in North Carolina, with a certain weather event, which I dare not mention because YouTube will slow their algorithm on me. That's what's in reference here, right? And I show you videos if you haven't seen some videos and looked at the news stories about what is happening thanks to the current weather event. Um, it's pretty dramatic what's happened to American citizens there, and this meme calls attention to the fact that the U.S. government is not going to help those people. It's just not going to. That's the reality we live in. It didn't help the people in East Palestine. It didn't help the people in Hawaii. And we could give you lots and lots of examples. And in the meantime, billions and 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 billions of dollars have been going to the Ukraine and yes, to Israel, as the meme says. Um, while Americans basically are SOL. If you don't know what SOL means shit out of luck. So American citizens is just one more example. It's just the latest example, a tragic example of American citizens being who trusted in the bargain. We've bought into this bargain, the Leviathan bargain, that will give the government, will give the state all these powers, and they will use all of their powers of taxation, whatever they are, to help us. But over the last, I don't want to say it, I mean, it certainly has been the Biden administration, certainly. A lot of these things have occurred during this administration, but it's not limited to the Democrats, even if they are the chief culprits to it. Don't get me wrong; I don't want to sidetrack myself too much. Republicans are guilty of it also, but the Democrats clearly have adopted this sort of Leviathan model to a higher degree. And Americans, when they endure these massive incidents that transcend even like they cross state borders, right? They're the kind of thing that if you're going to have a federal government, this is why you have federal government, for something that transcends a crisis that transcends the state borders. And the federal government is nowhere to be seen. And yet, somehow they managed to be completely Johnny on the spot for these overseas issues. So that's the situation. And I don't want to go into how much that bothers me. Right? It really does bother me. What I want to talk about in today's live stream is just the fact that we have to come to terms with this is just the way it is. You can want it to be a different way, but it's not that way. And so, you, whoever you are, whoever's watching, whatever circumstances you might be, you cannot count on your government to be there to lift you up, to support you, to keep you from drowning in a crisis. And it's inevitable that some crisis happens to you. So you can either bitch and moan about your federal government leaving you to drown, or you can take steps. You can take action right now to prepare yourself to survive in that scenario, to make sure that your loved ones survive in that scenario, whatever that scenario happens to be, or protect and defend your family, whatever the scenario happens to be. That's what it is. And so, as I constantly say, especially on the X channel, because it lends itself more for it, is we are on our own. That's the bottom line. It's horrible to say that, and it's somewhat an exaggeration, right? Because like even now, as I speak, with that weather event, which I shall not name, happening down on in North Carolina and Georgia or whatnot, um, there are thousands of Americans that are rallying right now to help those people. There are first responders that are going into the floodwaters to try to rescue people, right? I know a person personally who's involved in disaster relief who has made a very long trip from a safe area in the country with, and he's joining hundreds of other people to go down and help these people. And so I know that happens, and I know that happens in East Palestine. But these are, incidentally, the person that I just referenced. He's not going there with the aid and assistance of the federal government. He's going in there as a along with private individuals who are using their own money and finances to do that. The federal government, are they there? Uh no, no. I'm trying hard not to swear right now. I'm trying really, really hard to not get too profane. I mean, probably, probably FEMA is doing something there. You have to imagine FEMA is doing something there, but are they doing something to the scale that my friend and the group of people he's with are doing? No. You've got local first responders, you've got outside groups, and the federal government. I'm really trying hard not to swear because it just outrages me so much. But my point in all this, to bring it back around, my point in all this is you can cry about it, you can be mad about it, but it's just the reality. And so this is where we are right now in this country. What, for whatever value and merit there ever was in hoping that Leviathan would really take care of us, it's not happening. And maybe it would happen under Trump. We would hope so. But Trump, even if Trump wins, he's not going to be there forever, right? And so that leads to the next tragedy. And if If any of you are old enough, you might remember Hurricane Katrina, and a lot of people felt that George Bush did not do what was needful during that. Um, so, Republican or Democrat, it doesn't matter. The federal government's not going to be there to help you, to save you, to rescue you. Okay, I mean, maybe that's overstating a little bit. So maybe they'll show up, right? Maybe they'll show up, but the chances are good that you're going to be on your own, and that's what you have to plan on. That's the world that we live in. That's what you have to prepare yourself for, and that's the point of this video, to discuss that reality within that context. What are you going to do? Actually, that's the whole point of the YouTube channel that I've made. Is the whole point of the X account. Is the whole point of the Telegram. Is how can we all come together individually, separately, and together to equip ourselves to be able to survive when the so-called shit hits the fan. Because the law of averages suggests that no matter where we are in this country, it will happen. It might not be a hurricane, could be a tornado, or it could be, hey, a miscalculation by the federal government and our president to create a nuclear war with Russia or China or whatnot. Could happen. It seems pretty likely. In fact, every day it seems more likely. So that's kind of, I felt like that was, wow, that was 26 minutes, 25 minutes of going into all that. But I felt that we had to lay that framework of understanding that since about 1910 or so, our society has bought into this new framework where we're trusting the federal government to deliver certain services to us in regards to security and safety and other things, of course, and it's just not doing it. It's just failing, and so we live with that reality. So what are we going to do? And one of the things that we have to do is we have to begin developing our own analysis, intelligence analysis, almost like we are our own NSA, our own that's the National Security Agency, our our own. I don't know. I guess I'm not actually sure how to say this. We have to generate our own threat analysis for the world around us, and it's almost exhausting to have to think this way. But the way that current events continue to unfold, it really seems to me like it just we have to partition out time from our busy lives to think in these terms. In other words, um, we have jobs, right? Many of us are we have to work. We have to earn a living, and there's no way around that. But we also have family obligations, right? We have to make sure that our kids are okay. We've got to make sure that they are getting to and from college okay. We have to make sure that healthcare needs are being met. But in all of these obligations, that the little responsibilities that we have to manage ourselves, um, even in this world that has sort of transitioned from the world that the founders envisioned to a world of Leviathan, they still fall on us to do. In light of the fact that Leviathan itself has um, forsaken its own responsibilities to us, its own part of the deal. We gave it the power to We gave it the power to administer our lives in minute detail in exchange for certain benefits that we thought we would receive. One of these would be the benefit of not being incinerated in a nuclear holocaust. And we cannot count on Leviathan of being able to deliver on its side of the deal. That's where we are. And it doesn't have to be the nuclear holocaust, right? It could be a hurricane, it could be a derailment of toxic chemicals in East Palestine, it could be a god awful fire that gets out of control in Hawaii or California, which is constant. It could be anything. That's the world that we live in. And you could either say, well, I want Leviathan to do this, and then be shocked when it doesn't do it. Or you can be realistic and say, well, it's not going to do that. It's not going to protect me. It's not going to protect my family. It's just not going to. So what am I going to do? So one of the things that you have to do is you look at your busy life and all the things that consume your time in that busy life, and you nonetheless have to set apart time to analyze current events, international affairs, and of course, obviously domestic affairs as well, and find a way to chart a path forward to protect yourself and the ones that you love. That's the reality that we're in. In other words, you have to take on for yourself certain duties and obligations and responsibilities that you thought that your massive federal government with its 1 million federal bureaucrats and its $6 trillion budget and its $35 trillion deficit, you thought that they would be able to do for you, and they can't or won't do it for you. So you've got to do it for yourself. It sucks, but there it is, and it makes me pretty annoyed, even though I'm resigned to it. So I shall take a drink. Yeah, that's not going to help in the long term, but in the short term, we're going to take it. The drink is what I'm talking about. So let's get into this just a little bit. I don't want to get too long into it. So let's talk about Russia, Ukraine. We could talk about the escalations in Israel, right? Which would be interesting, because that's almost a case in point of how things escalate, how things get out of control, how regardless of what people might want or what people might say, I mean here in the United States, things could nonetheless careen into chaos. So I'm not trying to pick on the Biden administration, even though I do hate them with a passion. But Biden has clearly been trying to find a way to strike a balance, we'll say, supporting Israel and not enraging the Arab communities here in the United States, while condemning and combating Hamas and Hezbollah, which are horrible organizations with a tremendous amount of blood on their hands, so much blood. But right, people could say Israel has a lot of blood on their hands too right now. I'm not trying to wade into that debate. What I am trying to call attention to is just use this example, is that we know, if you've at all familiarized yourself with the scope and scale of the threats that face us here in the United States. So never mind what Israel has to deal with, but what do we have to deal with? And what we know is that Hezbollah and other Muslim terrorist groups, we'll say Iranian. I mean, they're really all across the scale. They're all of them have been coming across our border for years, not just recently. They've been infiltrating us for a long time, and this is sort of an open secret. We know this. This is just the truth. Now, why has why has Hezbollah not activated their terrorist cells here? That is exactly the kind of thing that you, as an independent threat analyst, should grapple with. You should come up with an explanation for that, so that you can come up with by along the same lines um, some sort of scenario by which you could envision that Hezbollah would decide to activate their cells here. So, in other words, we know that Hezbollah has cells here. We know this, right? Um, if you don't know this, go find out, because you need to find this out. That's the whole point of this video. Um, if they have not activated their cells, why not? And what do you think would prompt them to activate their cells? And answer that question, and then you will know, as a private party, as an individual citizen who has to deal with reality the way that it is, with your federal government totally letting you down left and right, you will be able to ascertain for yourself the kinds of circumstances by which Hezbollah would decide to activate itself, so that you, in other words, you would be able to see on your own the warning signs for the kind of circumstances that would cause Hezbollah to decide to start blowing up people or cafes or whatever it is that you think that they might do here. And right now, I'm not going to give you my own analysis. I'm just trying to goad you into the realization that you do have to start gathering the information necessary to make these determinations on your own. But obviously, I mean, it's not a coincidence that I bring this up, because look at the chaos going on right now in Israel. Just look at it. It's tremendous. Iran has clearly decided. I'm thinking here. So we're almost a year since Hamas invaded Israel and killed thousands of people and kidnapped hundreds of others. And Hamas, if you remember, hopefully you know, is also highly financed by Iran. Iran has apparently made a decision in the last year or so that the time for escalation from their own perspective of national interest is now. You know, going back to a year, they decided a year ago that the time was now. So they activated Hamas, they activated the Houthi down in Yemen, they activated Hezbollah, and Israel, of course, had their reaction to this. But the point is if Iran is activating all of their assets throughout the Middle East, why did they decide that the time was right? Could it possibly be because they were afraid, for example, of a Trump presidency, that a Trump presidency would not allow them the latitude to operate that a Biden administration might? I mean, I don't know. I mean, these are the kinds of things you should think about. And what if Iran were to suddenly start losing? What might they decide it was time to do? What might Iran begin to conclude if they're on the run in Lebanon because Israel keeps killing their leaders, the Hezbollah leaders there, or Israel begins blowing up munition plants, or not munition plants, not like the Houthi has munition plants in Yemen, missile sheds or whatever it is. If Iran decides that its national interests have suddenly become compromised because of the actions of Israel, and begin to fear that a new presidential administration might act far more aggressively than a Biden slash Harris administration might do, what might Hezbollah do? Excuse me. What might Iran do in the next 4 weeks? Wow, we're only about 4 weeks from the election, 5 weeks maybe. What might they do? I mean, these are the kinds of things you have to think about, that you have to process. And 20 years ago, you might have said to yourself, well, no, we'll just let the federal bureaucracy, the CIA, the NSA, the Department of Homeland Security, we'll let them cope with all this stuff. We'll put these matters in their hands. They'll take care of it. We cannot trust that they're going to do it. So I don't know what your answer to that is. I know what my answer to that is, and maybe I'll talk about it in another video. But my purpose in this is just to get you, the viewer, to grapple with the possibility that you have to analyze that for yourself and possibly come up with an action plan. In the meantime, that's just Israel. We have China and Taiwan, which I'm not going to get into for purposes, just to keep things down. And I see we're already at 41 minutes, but let's talk about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, which is really, really interesting right now. But where to start, right? So one of my main concerns with the Russia-Ukraine thing from the very beginning, and if people know me, they know that I've been worried about this for a long time, worried that it would escalate. That's kind of like the underlying theme of what I'm getting at, is that we have these escalations that are occurring, and we have a government that is incapable of predicting and coping and addressing these escalations. And so it's left to us to figure out our own action plan in that. And the Russia-Ukraine thing is no exception to that. Because when this began 3 years ago, I already began telling people that the people who are managing this from our side, to whatever degree that you could say that our government manages anything, they suck. They're stupid. They're dumb. They're evil. They're compromised. In short, there's a very good chance, I've been saying this for years, there's a very good chance that Russia-Ukraine could end with American boots on the ground. And we are closer to that today than ever before, for the very simple reason that Ukraine has now actually invaded Russia. I mean, you can't blame them. I'm not holding it against them. I mean, who could, right? But Ukraine has so Biden has said emphatically over the last few years that under no circumstances will there be American boots on the ground in the Ukraine Russia theater. Now, of course, we already know that. We already know that American soldiers are on the ground in the Ukraine. Now, if you don't know that, you need to broaden your sources of information, which is really the whole point of this video, right? Now, they're not there. wearing American uniforms, et cetera, but there is advisors, as technical advisors, as people to the as people to teach the Ukrainians how to use the American weapons that we've sent there, et cetera, et cetera. So, well, the situation that we're in is such that, in my opinion, Putin has basically decided he's going to wait to see the results of the U.S. presidential election, because if Trump wins, Trump has pledged that he's going to resolve the Ukrainian-Russian um, special military operation very quickly, and probably in a way that Putin, whether you like it or not, I'm not trying to. When I say these things, I hope no one thinks that I'm trying to say that I'm favoring them. I'm just trying to represent the way the world really is. And so, if Trump wins, Putin, and this is what I think Putin's counting on right now, um, Trump will aim for a reconciliation and a resolution to the conflict there in a way that will basically align with Putin's whole aims for his military incursion in the first place. And Zelensky may or may not like that, but that's just the way it is. However, if Kamala wins, she will more likely continue on with what Biden has been doing over these years, which has been playing this coy little game of trying not to trigger a third world war, while also supporting Ukraine to the highest degree possible. And this has been a dangerous game, more dangerous than I think people realize. And you may not like Putin, but I think he has known for a very long time that the best chances for a an end to these matters in a way that does not end up in absolute catastrophe for the whole world is for him to wait long enough for Trump to become president again. Because let's look at the pattern. So I have some links here ready to go here. So this is an interesting article here, and you'll be able to find it quickly enough if you Google it. Just look at the word here. I'm going to try to be quick here because I see now that we're already at 47 minutes. And I've talked about this at length already on my channel. So consistently what has happened is that Biden has said that he will not do certain things. But then after Putin has pushed the point and achieved successes, Biden has reneged on those pledges. So, for example, this is doesn't even this is you can find this. He said he's not going to allow for Poland to offer fighter jets to the Ukraine, and this is critical because Putin is a NATO country, and it's Article 13, right? That of the NATO Charter that says if anyone attacks a NATO country, then all of NATO is pledged to commit itself to fighting that war. So just think about how Putin is going to perceive this. If a NATO country gives to Ukraine weapons and assets, the ability to kill Russians, even if NATO is not directly involved in the actual pulling the trigger per se, but provides the weapons, how long before Putin decides, you know what, that's a distinction without a difference? And they decide, you know what, we're going to lose this. We're going to not just lose Ukraine, but the fundamental interests of Russia will be compromised by allowing these NATO countries to interfere in this way. And this has continued to escalate. And you can look at this link if you want. This is just some of them. Goes through February 2023, and so we're already well over a year. So Biden has pledged not to allow Ukraine to use tanks, American-made tanks, or British NATO. We'll just say NATO-made tanks. Biden has said that we're not going to allow them to use F-35s. We're not going to let them use our advanced missile systems like the Patriot or attack ATACMs, which basically is a missile system that would allow Ukraine to send missiles deep into Russia. Biden said that he would not allow that, but he is allowing that now. This just, I mean, I could keep going and going and going on things that Biden has said that he won't allow, which the circumstances on the ground have required Biden to change this such that it is now. Well, I'm just cutting through it. There's a lot to say. I'm trying to be direct here and succinct. The situation is such now that Ukraine's fortunes are so imperiled by Putin's aggression that Biden has allowed everything. They have allowed Ukraine everything they need to actually go as far as Moscow if they wanted to fight their war using NATO weapons, NATO technology, NATO intelligence. How long until Putin just simply decides or realizes that effectively NATO's already at war with him? And isn't that the reality? Isn't that what it is? Isn't that already the case? If you were to look at this with a sober mind. In fact, where things are right now, and this is really the kind of the critical point where I'm getting at with this, is as you sort of develop this intelligence yourself, as you think this through, we have given the Ukrainians tons of technology, and the Ukrainians, to their credit, have managed to leverage that technology in very powerful ways. It's really astonishing that they have not been overrun even to this point. But there's one thing the Ukrainians lack, and everyone knows this. And I hope you come to terms with this quickly. If you don't know this, they don't have the manpower. Russia has killed many, many Ukrainian soldiers. They're almost to the point in the Ukraine where they're going to have to start fighting with women and children. Now, they'll use that technology as much as possible, but they lack the manpower to substantially regain there's no chance. They're not going to be able to regain the Crimea. But maybe they could get the Donbass and some of that area back, possibly, if they had the manpower. But they don't have the manpower. So the situation heading into the 2024 presidential election, if Kamala were to win, within only a few months, she would have to decide. Now that they've gone through they've blown through almost every thing that they said they would not do, up to almost the last thing is, we're not going to put American troops on the ground. That's almost the last thing. It's either that or give up a whole portion of the territory of Ukraine to Putin and just let him run with it, or radically escalate things by putting American/NATO boots on the ground, which some countries in NATO, like Poland, have already talked about doing, which is so bad. So bad. Because we're talking about thumbing our nose at a nuclear power here, right? There, just so you know, there's a this article here, this timeline goes through some of these escalations, and they are clearly in favor of basically going to war, full out war with Russia. But you can cross reference these with the U.S. Department of Defense's own account, their own timeline, showing how we continue to escalate things. And they're going to continue to do it, right? So I'm not going, I have my own thoughts on this. But what I'm trying to encourage you, the viewer or the listener, to do is to develop your own thoughts on this. And that means gathering information on your own and coming to conclusions based on that information on your own. And does that mean, for example, that we are on the cusp of a nuclear war if Kamala were to win the White House? Not exactly, because a lot depends on how she actually does. And my personal belief is that um, Putin is not going to do that unless he believes his own life is literally on the line, or the welfare of the country. So not welfare of the country, like the integrity of the Russian country as being as an actual nation state. So, for example, if a series of assassination attempts on Putin were to occur, and he would basically conclude that there was a good chance that he was going to be assassinated successfully, I think he would go nuclear, because why the hell not? He's going to be dead anyway. See what I'm saying? And if they try to do another color, if they try to do excuse me, let me be precise. If the CIA tried to do a color revolution in Russia the way that we did with Ukraine and other countries, in other words, um, interfered with the elections of these other countries, interfered with the democratic uh, infrastructure of these other countries. If we did that in Russia, such that it appeared that the CIA was manipulating the Russian elections so that Putin would not win, he might go nuclear for that kind of circumstance also, because why the hell not? I mean, he's going to be dead. He's in his 70s. What I mean, what does he care? He's got nothing left to lose. And if we make it to, if we bring him to a point where he really has nothing left to lose, then wow, that's bad. I'm just going to say that's bad. We don't want that. And I'm not saying that Kamala is going to do that overnight, but if she continues the policies of Biden, combined with the fact that what Ukraine needs most are boots on the ground, Katie barred the door within 6 months or so. Who God only knows what kind of world we could be in. And I already talked about the Hezbollah, Israel, Hamas, Iran thing, and I haven't talked about China and Taiwan. There's every reason to think that the I don't want to make firm conclusions here, but these are just three strands of international events that are unfolding that could lead to a monumental calamity, such that the average American citizen is suddenly faced with horrors beyond speaking, And we have a federal government that is incapable of protecting and defending and supporting and rescuing Americans, even during weather events. If suddenly there was an intentional action by a state actor, a hostile foreign actor, in a context where you have a federal government that cannot even cope with natural disasters, holy crap, man! I mean, we are toast. We are governed by morons who cannot read the tea leaves, who make matters worse, and then cannot save us, even when there's not foreign actors involved. My friends, if you are not thinking very carefully about contingency plans for yourself and your loved ones, you are a fool. You are a fool. You are a fool. So it's time, if you are that person, to get your head out of your ass, come to terms with the world that you actually live in, realize that your government cannot or will not save you, and at the same time is leading us potentially into hell. I'm censoring myself here. And I know I get so worked up on all this. Um, you have to figure out how you are going to live on your own in a world that could possibly become post-apocalyptic in various degrees, right? I mean, who knows? Maybe Trump will win, and maybe he'll fix everything. But I'm not putting money on that myself. There's a good chance. He's had 2 assassination attempts right now. I'm not trying to. I mean, even if he wins, things might be so messed up that even he can't fix them. But let's just say that we think that he could. There's already been 2 assassination attempts on him right now. Chances are really good. It seems that people really want him dead. The deep state, Iran, your random crazy Antifa person. I mean, he might not live to the election anyway. And so then, if that's your hope, if that's what you're waiting for, you don't even have that, is what I'm saying. So I'm going to just kind of conclude this by saying, my friends, if you love the people in your life, and if you love your life, you've got to start making contingency plans. Yes, but you also need to begin gathering information from the news and other sources and making your own determinations about the best path forward for your own safety and security. Because these people, the people in charge, they're stupid. And that, unfortunately, is the world that we live in. And you're going to have to face the consequences, because there's nothing that, aside from possibly voting for Trump. I mean, I just talked about that, right? What the caveats are there. Um, we're on our own here, and you're on your own. And there are things that we can do and should do, and maybe they won't be able. Maybe they won't be enough, but at least when everything goes down, you can say you did whatever that you could. You did what you could to prepare yourself as well as you possibly could, and you'll be able to sleep better at night. Just be able to sleep at night in good, clean conscience, knowing that you did what you could. Okay, so we actually do have some people watching this here on YouTube and on Telegram as well. It's not a lot, but we're trying to change that. This is being simultaneously broadcast in the Telegram channel and here on YouTube. And the chat is activated in both places. Does anyone have questions or comments, things they would like me to address? I'll give it a minute or two if you so desire to post something here. And I thank you for watching. I thank you for joining me during the live stream. And if you are watching this later, if you watched all the way through to the end You're an amazing person, and I really appreciate you. And I really hope that you do find me on Telegram if you're that person. Give it another minute if anyone has any questions or comments. Okay, well, we're just gonna wrap it up with that then. Thank you again for watching to this point. Really appreciate it, and help spread the word. Find us on Telegram. Spread the word about all these channels. The Philosopher King 2.0 is back in the saddle, ready to help us all be masters of our own domain. Thanks for watching. Have a good night. See you the next time. Peace out.